Welcome to Friday's edition of Big Blue Kickoff Live here on Giants.com as well as the mobile app. He's Paul Dottino. I'm Lance Medow with you for the next 60 minutes. And Big Blue Kickoff Live is presented by Cadillac, the official luxury vehicle of the New York Football Giants. Multiple ways you can interact with us here on the program. You give us a ring, 201-939-4513. Hashtag Giants Chat on Twitter. And as a reminder, you can find the archive of this show and our entire podcast network on the Giants mobile app, podcast platforms everywhere, and at Giants.com/podcast. So a rough Thursday night for the Giants as they fell to the San Francisco 49ers 30-12. They fall to 1-2 on the season. We'll get into the ins and outs of the game, and then we'll open up the phone lines as we move forward here. And Paul, you and I, we talked about this being a big theme entering this game. The slipperiness, the elusiveness of the San Francisco 49ers. And when you go up against a team like this, you have to be able to tackle. If you don't tackle, then you're going to see a bunch of plays that could have easily been 5 to 6 yards end up doubling that. And that's what jumped out to me. And there's a lot of other elements I want to get into, but
sure,
you got a 3rd and 15 and a 3rd and 13 on the same exact drive, and the Niners are able to convert both of them. And it was both short passes we're talking about, Paul. They were not throwing bombs down the field. I actually was crunching the numbers, and before I get your reaction, I just want to put things in perspective here. The San Francisco 49ers had 16 plays of 10 or more yards, okay? So that's first down territory we're talking about. 10 of the 16 plays, Paul, were defined as what my interpretation is short to medium range passes, meaning Brock Purdy was not going for the home run, he was going for the base hit.
Yep.
So when you take all that into consideration, the Niners were getting a lot of chunk plays, and the majority of that was coming after the catch. And that, to me, is a reflection of not being in position to make a fundamentally sound tackle and do damage control on the play.
It's a problem through the first 3 games of the season.
Yeah, Arizona too, we saw it. Yep.
Okay, and I don't understand it. The Giants have too much talent on defense and too many playmakers on defense to watch them literally crumble right in front of our eyes like a stale graham cracker. I don't have an explanation for it right now. I really don't. There are too many players on this defensive unit who have the back of a football card that says they are playmakers. They are guys who can stop the bleeding. They are guys who can step up and create havoc, that can turn the tide of a game. They have several of those guys on defense, and those plays are not happening. I give a lot of credit to Deebo Samuel, for being very elusive.
Powerful runner, too.
I give a lot of credit to McCaffrey, who, when you see him in person, I've had the chance now over his career to see him a few times in person. He is something else. He's slippery enough where he's small enough that he can hide behind people. He's slippery enough that he does slither through creases extremely well. And he's strong enough that you can't arm tackle him, and then even if you do get a one-on-one tackle, it still requires another 2 or 3 guys to stop him 5 yards downfield.
He has that second burst after he gets
really does. And so, I know, what are we talking about? McCaffrey's great. Okay, duh. Tell me something else we don't know. But he really impresses the crap out of you when you see him in person, especially from the sideline. I've seen him a couple of times, 2, 3, 4 times in his career. And he is just, he's not the fastest guy. He's not the biggest guy. He's not the strongest guy. There's nothing about him that is 10 plus over the top great if you grade him. But my goodness, he finds so many different ways to be productive when that ball is in his hands. Even the catch he made.
Yeah. Well, he's an excellent receiver out of the backfield. It's not just the running that you have to account for.
That catch was dynamite. That was a heck of a grab. He's a killer.
It's a big reason why his presence specifically, and you mentioned Samuel, George Kittle, to me, also deserves a lot of credit.
But we know what Kittle is. He's been that way since he was in Iowa.
I get that, Paul, but Kittle was relatively quiet in the first 2 games of this season.
I know George Kittle.
No, I know we don't have to convince, but Kittle was getting all of those extra effort plays too, and that was a huge weapon and a huge key factor. And you look at the numbers, San Francisco was 9 of 16 on third down, and they weren't getting gift-wrapped opportunities on third down too. That's the real head-scratcher, whereas the Giants, Paul, on the opposite end of the spectrum, 3 of 12 on third down. They converted their first 2 third downs. You know what? They went the rest of the game. They went 1 for 10. The rest of the way, after the first 2 third down conversions. And part of it was negative plays after you gain an initial chunk of yardage, and penalties put them back. Azudu had the face mask penalty late in the game. But if you can't convert third downs and you're down double digits, you stand no chance. I mean, that's the reality of football, because you're up against the clock to begin with. You don't have the ability to have multiple at-bats moving forward. And Paul, I don't think it's a coincidence when I give you those third down numbers and then you look closely at how this game played out and you wonder, okay, well, how did the Giants score? You know how the Giants scored their lone touchdown? A special teams penalty on San Francisco,
right?
Fair catch interference, and then a few plays later, a defensive pass interference call. So the Giants got 30 yards of field positioning from those 2 penalties in extreme short field, and that was it. That was the lone touchdown. They did score 2 other field goals, but when you have a 3 for 12 mark on third down and the other team is 9 for 16, one team's moving the ball freely, the other team's not. I mean, that was a huge differential in addition to, of course, the missed tackling.
See, here's the difference in how you tell an elite team from a non-elite team in this league. The Giants were only down by 1 score going into the fourth quarter. Okay? It was 20-12 after they had failed with that 2-point conversion. Actually, it was 17-12.
Yeah.
Excuse me.
Then they tacked on the field goal.
And then Niners got a field goal. So in the fourth, it was 20-12. So it's 8 points. It's 1 score and a 2-point conversion. With what? 13.
Didn't feel like that though.
Doesn't matter.
No,
With 13 minutes to play, you're down by 1 possession.
No, you're still very much in the
Which means you are very much in that game. Regardless of what's happened to that point, you're still very much in that game. And that's where the Giants needed to do something with one of these defensive players who needs to make a play. And instead, they don't get it. They offensively,
well, they went 3 and out after the field goal. So, I mean, that to me spells out your point. 3 plays for 1 yard. That was the drive. And you had a false start penalty.
All right, so that's the early field goal that makes it 23-12 early in the fourth. Okay? I'm talking about here, it's 20-12 at the end of the third. Oh, that you mentioned the false start right there? I got you.
That's the exact drive I'm referring to.
Yeah,
sure.
And then the 2 incompletions, and they're forced to punt.
Yep.
That was the chance for the offense to say, hey, we're going to make this a game the rest of the way.
Sure.
We're not going to let San Francisco breathe. We're going to keep the heat on them. No matter what's happened to this point, we are going to make sure this game is a barn burner. That was the offense's chance right there on that drive, and they could not do it. Then they give the ball to the Niners, and what is now the defense has to say, all right, you guys, this is complimentary football, right? You guys didn't do what you needed to do to put the heat on San Francisco and make sure that this was a game. It's now our chance to make a play. Let's turn the tide. Even if we don't get a turnover, okay, and we don't get a defensive touchdown, you know what? We're going to do something here to keep it a 1-score game so that you get another chance. And what happens? 8 plays, 41 yards, field goal. It's now 23-12. Now it's a 2-score game. And now, 2-score game early in the fourth quarter. Now the Niners control the narrative. Now they've got their hands on your throat. And it's going to be really, really hard to climb out of that quicksand. That 2-possession, or I guess 2 series, Giants,
label it that way,
and then San Francisco, that to me is where the game finally was decided. Not that the Niners didn't outplay the Giants, because they had.
Yeah, I mean, the writing on the wall was there early.
It was.
But if you want to hone in on 2,
those 2 possessions, to me, is what put the Giants in big-time doo-doo right there.
Well, because you could say the wheels on the bus just rolled right off after that. Because look at the last few possessions for the Giants. After they score that touchdown because of the 2 penalties, the very short field. So the Niners tack on the field goal. It's a 20-12 game. Here's the last possessions of the game that followed for the Giants. 3 and out. 3 and out.
Yep.
An interception, 3 and out.
Right. As opposed
The 4
to
possessions, end the game.
As opposed to when they play a subpar team like the Cardinals, they were able to do what they had to do, execute the comeback, and win the game. Now you're talking about an elite team like the 49ers, and that stuff does not happen. Now, the good news, you don't play the 49ers every week. You don't play the Cowboys, who maybe I've underestimated. Maybe they are a top shelf team.
Just a tad.
Okay? So you don't play the Cowboys and the Niners and the Eagles, by the way. You don't play those teams every week. So you better pile up the wins against all the other teams.
Well, Buffalo and Miami are no slouches, though, I would say. But this goes back to, Paul, what you're emphasizing is what I had been inkling after the Dallas game, which is the fact that Dallas and San Francisco are much more closer together versus Arizona, and how you have to look at the caliber of the opponent you're playing before running away with conclusions after one game on a random week.
Right.
And I think we saw that in the wake of last night's game. And I understand the Giants were undermanned at certain positions, but I mean, the Niners were without Brandon Ayuk. And we weren't talking about the absence of Brandon Ayuk. Mm-hmm. So there are teams that find a way to strategize and make up for the absence of some key players, and we've seen that.
There's no doubt that losing Barkley and losing Thomas was much more impactful to the Giants than it was Ayuk to San Francisco.
No, but I feel like, Paul, don't you feel in years past, haven't we been in this situation where the Giants go in, they have a few guys absent, and the results seem to be similar, I would say. More often than not.
Again, it always depends on who is it that's missing.
Sure, yeah.
The bigger the piece that's missing, the bigger the impact.
And the more difficult it is to replace that player.
I mean, from their perspective, if they want to look at it this way, no Thomas and no Barkley, and there they are, 1 score down with 1 quarter to go. If they want to, they could choose to look at it that way and say, hey, we were hanging with one of the best teams in the league, 1 score down with 2 all-pro players not being in the game, including the conduit for your offense. Look, I said all last week, Daniel Jones was going to have to throw for 300 yards and run for 80 yards and have a monster game for the Giants to have a puncher's chance to win. I firmly believed the Niners had a right to be favored. They had a right to be the team that was going to control the narrative. All the paths to victory, almost all of them, favored San Francisco. So this is not a surprise.
No, not at all.
The way this thing happened, okay? This is obviously not an upset. This is the way it was presumed to go down. For the Giants to have a puncher's chance, Jones was going to have a phenomenal day offensively, and the Giants had no running game whatsoever.
11 carries, 29 yards. And Daniel wasn't a factor on the ground either.
He was not.
And by the way, I listened to the Niners after the game. They were all going into this contest, Paul, anticipating that there would be more zone reads because that was areas that they struggled with previously. They were anticipating that Jones was going to be a big part of the ground attack. But they, I think, did a really nice job. And part of this was, going back to your point, you don't have to account for Saquon Barkley, so you could focus more on Daniel Jones's mobility.
No doubt. And that's the problem. Barkley's a headache player. He causes the other team to respect so much more in your game plan. And so without Barkley there, that was a significant dent in the Giants' ability to even threaten San Francisco. So that's why it was, to me, the Giants were going to have to come out very aggressive, throwing the ball early, deep, and Jones was going to have a monster game for 4 quarters. Well, San Francisco did not respect the run. They shut the run down, so that was out the window. So now the entire prism, if you will, is tilted, and the Giants are climbing uphill. And clearly, in the passing game, they did not make enough plays where they had some chances. They had some chances to make a few plays in the passing game, and guys got either they dropped it or the ball got knocked out.
Well, Darren Waller, the throw over the middle was high to him, and then there was one down the sideline. So those were two opportunities where it was a little bit down the field. But, also we go back to the pass protection, Paul. I mean, you can't overlook that. I understand the numbers are not as bad as the Dallas game. Daniel Jones was sacked twice, and they gave the Niners six quarterback hits, okay?
Yeah.
But if you watch that
which is
game,
actually not terrible.
No, I agree with you. But here's where I would argue, I don't think the numbers do justice for the game. I think if you watch that game, you saw that the Niners were constantly in the vicinity of Daniel Jones. That pocket was closing. So there were times where, if you notice, he'd step out of the pocket and sometimes he'd try to dump it off to a Matt Breida because he figured, okay, this is the best way to salvage the play. So if you don't have a mobile guy like Daniel Jones, he's probably taking a sack under those circumstances. But I just felt the Niners, just like Dallas, dictated the tone again in the trenches.
And, I thought that ultimately, as Brian Dable said this morning, all three phases just did not do enough. And the team has to improve in all three phases. So I don't want to just say one of the phases screwed up. That's not the case.
No, well, we talked about missed tackles, third down, lack of efficiency. You could take whatever pill you want to run with here.
And again, even on specials, Gray ran that one kickback and only got to the 19.
Yeah.
Now I like Eric Gray, and I don't want, again, please, this is very low on one of the reasons why they lost last night. Eric Gray's
wouldn't be in the top of the priority
It's
list.
not.
Yeah.
But when Coach Dable says all three phases have to improve, don't leave that out either, because that's something that needs to also be addressed.
Well, it's field positioning.
I will tell you, the coverage units, though, much, much better since McLeod got into the lineup opening day. You guys notice Nick McLeod is down there like a lightning bolt. I mean, he has picked up his game. He's forcing fair catches, and guys are like very leery of returning kicks now because Nick McLeod's getting down there. That's the one really big positive that I've seen after 3 games that I did not necessarily know after the preseason was going to be there. You remember my concern.
Yeah.
McLeod is playing, whatever phrase you want to use, he's playing great on the kick coverage.
And they also did not activate Tywan Jones from the practice squad because it would have been his third and final call up, and then you would have had to add him to the 53. So you had to sacrifice some help on special teams.
I know.
And part of that was because of the injuries, of course, on the offensive line. But that, I think, goes right into play with respect to what you're talking about with Nick McLeod. I want to hit on one other aspect with respect to the defense before we open up the phone lines here. And the defense, remember, was not missing a key component like the offense. So it's fair to put that group under the microscope and question and wonder, why are we seeing some struggles with the fundamentals? But there were 3 penalties on third downs, Paul. And those are automatic first downs. And I just want to highlight a few of them. Number 1, the roughing the passer call. That, to me, was textbook.
Horrific.
No, see, I disagree with you.
Horrific
I completely
call.
disagree with you. Completely disagree.
You're talking about Leonard Williams?
Absolutely. I'm
Horrific call. Horrific call.
I don't understand. How is it horrific?
The entire stadium thought that was a bad call.
Well, that's because I don't think they understand the rule.
Wow.
No, but I want to know. I want to understand why it's a horrific call, though.
He did not take an extra step to make connection with the quarterback.
But that's irrelevant to the play, though.
No. He didn't use his helmet. That's
Correct.
number 1.
He didn't use his helmet.
He didn't hit him head to head. He didn't hit him in the head in any way.
All fair.
It was a clean hit.
I'm not
and he
disputing that.
did not take a step after the ball was released, because if you take a full step after the ball comes out and then hit the guy, now they'll say you had time to stop and pull up. That didn't happen.
Well, I'm not disputing any of that, but
So
all of that criteria, though, I'm arguing is irrelevant because his whole body weight went onto.
Oh,
Purdy.
you went that way?
That's the rule. What do you mean I went that way?
No. As I understand it, the body weight deal is if you launch yourself and collapse a guy like a pancake, and because your feet come up and you boom and you smash him down, that's the body weight rule.
Well, that's not how the rule...
If you get a guy horizontally and just flatten him, that's clean.
That's not how the rule is written. And I quoted the rule. I'll bring up the rule here in terms of what I put on social media, because there's the word "or" in it, and this is the key phrase. I'm going to read you the exact rule.
It's not called that way. I'll tell you that. It's not called that way consistently in the league.
Oh, Chris Jones had to play on Derek Carr last season, which was very similar.
Guys usually have to launch and airborne and crunch.
No, I understand what you're saying.
That's usually the way it's called.
But that's not how the rule is written. Let me just read you the rule. Here's the rule. Okay, quote, when tackling a passer who's in a defenseless posture during or just after throwing a pass, a defensive player must not unnecessarily or violently throw him down, okay, or land on top of him with all or most of the defender's weight. So the reason why this applies is Purdy got rid of the ball, okay, so that applies. And then after that, Leonard Williams' full body weight went down on Brock Purdy. So that to me is the textbook interpretation of the rule. And Brian Daboll spoke after the game. I don't know if you got a gist of what he said. And he said he got the official's explanation, and he said it was completely understandable under the circumstances, and then was asked a follow-up.
I was in the locker room while Daboll was speaking.
And I'm not accusing you of not. That's why I asked. I wasn't sure whether you were in the vicinity. I'm just explaining what Brian Daboll said. And then he was asked, well, what's the teachable point there? And he says, you got to get the guy to the side. The defender I'm talking about. He's got to go down to the side of the quarterback, or you got to wrap him up and sort of roll down with him. Listen, I understand this is not easy, and people want to talk about the art of physics and this and that. I'm just quoting the exact rule, and I'm telling you, I thought
I'm going to watch it myself as you open up the calls.
And that's fine. And to each their own.
I'm going to watch it again.
But before you do that, the other two, though, I wanted to briefly get to. There was the Darnay Holmes, and then there was the call on Kayvon Thibodeau, the illegal contact. And on the broadcast, they brought up that what Thibodeau did there was he gave a shove, okay? He doesn't give a shove to the guy. There's no ammunition to throw the flag. It was the shove that made it the illegal contact. Because I know a lot of people watch that play and like, oh, it's touchy-feely.
It was ticky-tack, but he did contact.
But it was the shove.
He did contact.
The shove is what put it over the top.
So...
No, I could see you're struggling with this, and I'm not fighting you on this.
Because
I just wanted to know where you stood.
I don't want to come out. I don't want to come out and say, okay, but now I'm going to have to say this.
That's fine. Say it.
There were a lot of folks in that building who did think that the officiating was rather slanted last night.
Well,
but that is only reason number 235 down on the bottom of the list as to why the Giants lost.
No, that's
so let
fine.
me make that very clear.
And I'm with you.
Okay.
I'm not.
So we're good.
Yeah. I just wanted to explain the whole roughing the passer from a technical standpoint.
I think that's admirable that Coach Daboll was okay with the interpretation. I don't think a lot of other people were.
And like I said, it's a subjective business because it's the written rule applying to what your eyes see. And I understand everybody sees things differently. But my perspective, I thought it was to the T in terms of how they've interpreted it in the past. All right. A few reminders before we open up the phone lines here on Friday's edition of Big Blue Kickoff Live. The Giants Huddle podcast, you can check that out on your favorite podcast platform. You go to giants.com/podcast. As far as tickets moving forward here, season ticket membership, you can take your fandom to the next level. Stay connected to the club all year round, not just on game days. Memberships now available for the 2023 season. To learn more about all the exclusive member benefits, visit giants.com/tickets. Limited inventory is available. Then there's option B, which is single game tickets. Don't miss the Giants at MetLife Stadium this season. You can visit giants.com/tickets to secure your seat. The Giants are going to have a 5K race coming up. It's also a kids run. It's presented by Quest, Sunday, October 8th, 9 a.m. Eastern, MetLife Stadium. Net proceeds will benefit the Giants Foundation. All participants will receive a commemorative t-shirt. After the race, stay for a post-race festival with appearances by Giants legends and a live DJ. Register now at giants.com/5K. And last but not least, the Giants official connected TV streaming app. And you can watch Big Blue Kickoff live on this streaming app. Giants TV. It brings you original video content, game highlights on demand, and direct to Big Blue fans. Giants TV is free. It's on Apple TV, Roku, Amazon Fire TV, as well as the Giants mobile app. All right, let's open up the lines at 201-939-4513 as we move forward here on BBKL. We check in with Guy in Pennsylvania to get us going. What's happening, Guy? What do you got for us?
Can you hear me?
Hear you loud and clear. Yep.
Yeah. I'm going to make a couple comments and then maybe two questions, and they'll be quick.
I hope so.
First
okay,
of all,
you're on the clock. Let's go.
I realized we were playing against two supermen in Samuels and McCafferty. All right, that's just a given from a novice fan. Secondly, from a novice fan, when we drafted Thibodeau and Neal, I thought, boy, now we've got two big strapping guys that are going to make us bigger, better than we ever were. that really isn't playing out to my estimation, but that's just a comment from a fan who's just not an expert.
Understandable.
And then third, and this is an easy question, that little pass that Brightwell caught in that first drive, one of the clips I saw, I didn't see anybody within a 10-acre field of him. Was that going to be a big play if he catches that, or if he hits him in stride better?
The one that he dropped? Yeah.
Yeah, that
yeah, it was.
The whole ball game.
Well, but I don't think that was the first drive. That was
on
later in the
anyway.
game, if memory serves me correctly.
The drop
wasn't it?
was...
It was early. It was in the first drive.
The drop was in the Giants' first drive.
Was it?
First
Okay.
and 10 from the San Francisco 30, left flat, and he just took his eye off the
right
ball.
through his chest, yeah.
And that's I'm not going to say it's a touchdown, but he's got some room. He can do some things.
Yeah, okay. Well, that was that one. And then finally, my third question, or the last question. The play below the X's and the O's of three players yesterday stood out to me, and maybe I'm not missing it, because like I say, I don't see the game like you guys. I don't see it. I don't see the whole field. I just see the ball. But the play of Parrish Campbell and our big tight end Waller
Yep.
and Thibodeau just didn't seem to get it. And again, maybe you don't share the same thing I saw, but I kind of noticed that on those three players. Could you want to maybe just comment on that?
Sure.
I'd appreciate
Yeah, you got it, Guy, and appreciate the phone call. Thanks for giving us a ring. I'm assuming the caller's referring to maybe the lack of impactful plays. And let's face it, you can really point to all aspects of the team. There weren't a lot of impactful plays in comparison to what San Francisco did. Waller, I said, had 2 targets where one of them, and Brian Daboll, by the way, also addressed this, the throw over the middle. I know a lot of people were saying, Waller needs to do more. He went full extension. It was high. I don't know what you thought of it, Paul, but I thought Daniel Jones put a little too much mustard on that throw. I don't really think there was anything else anything else Waller could have done to try to make that grab. It literally went off of the top of his fingertips, and Waller is no small guy.
Tough play, but a guy who we're praising as an elite player. You want to see him make that play.
I don't know what else he could have done.
Now,
to make
I've
that
just
play.
looked at the Williams hit on the quarterback 4 times. I suppose he could have moved 6 inches to the right, and maybe that would have avoided the flag. But as if I'm a football coach, I love that hit. I think it's a great hit. It's clean. I'm loving it.
It wasn't a dirty play.
It's a
Absolutely.
textbook hit.
Yeah.
It's a textbook hit. I appreciate what you said by the black and whiteness of the rule. I will simply say that 9 times out of 10, that's probably not getting called.
Well, that's where I disagree with you. 'Cause, I think it's been a trend over the last few years because this has been a point of emphasis, Paul. And I referenced Chris Jones, Derek Carr. I'm not saying you could bring that play up. Monday Night Football
How many others, though, can you bring up? You just cited one.
There was a Grady Jarrett, I want to say, on Tom Brady.
Man,
One.
I'm loving that hit. There's nothing dirty about that hit. No. Nothing dirty about that hit at all.
But once again, the rule has nothing to do with
I know.
dirtiness or the lack thereof.
I understand.
It's simply based on, do you put your full body weight on the quarterback?
It comes down to the consistency of how the rule is called. We know that there are a lot of rules that are not consistently called the way they're written in the book.
Well,
we know that.
Officiating by definition
Anyway.
and by trade is subjective. I think you would agree, right? I mean, you could have different officiating crews, and some will be a little bit more leeway in terms of the others. So I think that's a given. I just was curious in terms of, we talked about Darren Waller. The last caller also brought up Parris Campbell as well as Kayvon Thibodeau. And Thibodeau's been put under the microscope. He did get a sack in last night's game, but I don't think there were many impactful plays overall on the defense. I understand it's easy to pinpoint Kayvon, but you look at the Giants were credited with 6 quarterback hits, and they did get 2 sacks because the other sack was split between Leonard Williams and DJ Davidson. And Davidson, by the way, got hurt, who I thought played very well. He was very active. He had a batted ball down at the line of scrimmage.
Yes.
Him and Micah McFadden, if there's 2 guys in particular that I think are worth commending for being active and making tackles and being in the right spot, I thought those 2 guys stood out throughout the course of the game.
McFadden was involved in a lot of plays. He missed a few too, where he let guys shed.
Nobody was perfect by any means.
Flat out missed the guy. But to your statement, he was very active, and he certainly did also make a number of plays.
I mean, the guy had 10 tackles, 9 solo, 4 for loss. So I think the numbers at least support that. Unfortunately, there were also plays where the Giants were in position, it seemed, to make a tackle, and it was like bumper cars. There was one right when Samuel, he got hit, and then he launched forward for 5 additional yards to get the first down.
See, if I'm Wake Martindale, one of the things, and there are a few, but one that would really, really make me seethe is it seemed like more than half the time, even when a second Giants player contacted and tried to gang tackle, if you will,
to assist, yeah,
there would still be another 2 or 3 yards of momentum that would come out of the 49er offensive player.
They're bouncy.
It was like, come on, man. When you hit the guy, that's supposed to be the end of it, okay?
Well, it's not
you
like
hit
that
the
with
guy,
the Niners, though.
Boom. There's no more forward action there. Even in the process of the tackle, they were getting an extra 3 yards.
They're the type of team where you could actually hit the guy, he'll bounce backwards, and then he'll get in better position to run by you.
There was one of those, and again, I'm a Kittle guy, but there was one of those with Kittle where he was contacted like a good yard behind the sticks. And somehow, in the process of the tackle, he gains 2.5 yards.
Well, because of the stiff arm, the ability to move forward. That's why San Francisco is so challenging, because unlike other teams, it's the combination, Paul, and this goes back to what we were talking about earlier. They're slippery, they're elusive, but they're also powerful, okay? They're not just small guys that run around and you're trying to bring them down. They'll run you over.
From the moment of the McCaffrey trade, excuse me, I had said right away, Philadelphia and San Francisco are the 2 rosters in the conference that are far beyond everybody else. Now, whether or not you want to believe that Dallas is for real and they've kind of moved up into the category that makes them elite in the NFC, and there are now 3 elite NFC teams, you could start making that argument now, the way that they're playing.
Yeah, I think they have all separated themselves.
But San Francisco, from the moment they made that McCaffrey trade, they put themselves right up there in the penthouse. And it hasn't changed.
Well, think about this. Since Brock Purdy took over as the starting quarterback,
8-0 in regular season.
They have not lost a regular season game. So I think that says an awful lot. And Purdy, I didn't think had a stellar game. I thought the Giants got to him early. You got to give the Giants defense credit. They did fluster him a little bit.
They had chances on the night. I want to say at least 2, maybe 3 interceptions they could have had.
Well, Kittle played defensive back on one of them.
I
knocked it away from Adoree.
I know.
And you need to do that when the ball's
Pinnock had a shot at one, too.
Yeah. Well, there was a deflected ball, and then it was Jawan Jennings, I believe, went up, or was it Ronnie Bell?
Bell had a deflected ball that he pulled down.
That was it. Okay. Yeah. So
and then, of course, the Giants deflect the ball later on in the game. Not that it mattered.
And that gets intercepted.
And they intercept the ball. Yeah. Of course. Why not?
What's kind of crazy, actually, Paul, the fact that you brought up, if you look at the majority of interceptions, and there's been 4 of them.
3 of the 4.
They've all been ricocheted.
3 of the 4 picks charged to Jones were off of people's hands.
Yeah, 2 off of Barkley, and then the one that happened yesterday.
You know, but then you get a national guy was talking this morning. I heard at a broadcast. Oh, yeah, Daniel Jones, again, throwing interceptions like he always does.
Well, that's why context matters.
That's why the narrative is just so ridiculous.
I brought this up with respect to Dak Prescott last season, Paul.
I know.
I mean, in fairness, you got to be balanced. They did the same thing with Dak last season and his 15 interceptions, but Josh Allen, who was plagued by turnovers, got the benefit of the doubt when his decisions were even more costly.
We do have to be much more discerning. You need to be able to see them and
bingo. Yep.
I just and sometimes it's just not possible because it just takes too much time to track down everybody's picks.
But if you want to have a fair and balanced conversation,
but to be totally fair, and I was very harsh on Prescott for his turnovers in the last 2 years. To be totally fair, you do have to do the deep dive into every single one of them.
Real quick, and we'll get to some more calls.
Yeah, we haven't done enough with the calls.
But I wanted to bring this up because I was having this conversation with somebody else. I would like to see another statistical category column in the
team
box
interceptions.
Score. Well, I like baseball errors, meaning an error by the skill set position that led to the interception. I just like a volume. You're still going to have to analyze
baseball doesn't have a team error, and they should.
So that would be something that I think you need to take into consideration with respect to the quarterbacks. All right, let's head back to lines. We check in with Donnie in Queens here on BBKL. What's happening, Donnie? What do you got for us?
Hey, happy Friday. If you told me before the season they'd be 1-2, I wouldn't have been disappointed. But if you told me how it played out, I would have been. I think kind of like you guys alluded to, there's a clear line of demarcation here that the Giants have not approached. At least through 3 games, there has not been enough progress made.
Well, that's why you don't talk about closing the gap until you actually see visualization.
Correct.
I mean, that's what it comes down to. You don't win games on paper.
This has been going on for 10 years now. Multiple different regimes, coaching staffs, quarterbacks, players. I just don't understand why the Giants, multiple times a year, their offensive line is like not NFL caliber. Like, it's beyond uncompetitive. And I know it's different opponents, but I just watched Seattle this past Sunday go into Detroit without their 2 starting tackles and score 40. And Paul, I know you're probably not going to like this comment. I'm going to just ask you to let me finish, and then I'll hang up and listen. The quarterback has to be a part of this equation where they're not making the line better. And I think that Jones, one of my bigger issues with him is I don't believe he processes fast. I think he has to see a guy open before he throws it. I don't think he's a good anticipatory thrower. I don't see him throwing guys open. And I think right now the fairest statement to make about Daniel Jones is that while he's not the biggest problem on this football team, he is certainly not an equalizer either. So just a really disappointing start to the season. All the main cogs that we were expecting to be the best players on this team are either hurt or have underperformed. So just a really disappointing night, and frankly, I feel like this season's headed to the tank. But we'll see. I'll hope I'm wrong, and we'll see what happens on Monday night.
All right, Donnie.
I appreciate.
Appreciate the call. You got it.
I go back to I've always thought 3-3 after 6 games was the target, because I think that 3-3 after 6 gives you a realistic chance to be 10-7, which is what I projected for this team. They are 1-2. Yeah, they lost to 2 elite teams.
And also look at what it took to win the one game. Also,
well, here's what it comes down to.
So
here's what it comes down to: the emotional scarring and the perception of how they got to 1-2 is what's driving the narrative right now, as opposed to just being 1-2. As the caller said, if you told them a month ago the team would be 1-2 after 3 games, you would have accepted that, understanding that Dallas and San Francisco will be favored, and the favorite teams won both of those games. So that's how you have to look at it, because the NFL does not give you style points. You tell me this all the time.
Yep.
They don't give you style points. You're still 1-2 on the NFL standings over at Park Avenue. They're lining up the standings there, and they're figuring out, okay, who's won games, who's lost games. They don't give horses butt.
Whether you lose by 30 or win by 30.
They don't.
Yeah.
The league does not care. Ultimately, they're going to tally up the wins and losses at the end of the season, and they will tell you if you are invited to continue playing. That's what it comes down to. I've always said, since the season started, the end of training camp, I think it's a 10-7 team, and I think they'll be 3-3 after the first 6 games. Now, I had them beating Dallas opening day, but my other wins were against the Cardinals and the Seahawks. I still believe that they will beat the Seahawks. Now they're going to have to steal one from Miami on the road in order to probably get to that 3-3 mark, because you'd have to believe Buffalo will be favored at home. Okay, so right now, in the golf term, Jeff Eagles, I know you're going to love this. Right now, they bogeyed. They bogeyed. Okay, so they just gotta shoot a birdie, and they'll be back to par. That's all.
Well, you're basically laying out a situation where now you have to take away from Peter to pay Paul, essentially, and pun intended.
There you go.
Because you lost the Dallas game, so now you got to find a way to make up for it. Here's, though, what I will add to what you're saying. And I completely agree, because I'm the one that preaches it, so I'm not going to
That's how the coaches have to approach it. That's how they have to approach it.
100%. That you can't get too caught up in how you win and how you lose games. I'm completely with you.
Right.
But here's where I will put some substance and stock in. When the same issues, Paul, show up multiple times, that's where you could say, okay, well, it may not be the end result, but teams are going to continue to notice problems in the trenches, right?
doubt.
On the offensive line. They're going to continue to attack you there until you fix it. Teams are going to notice they miss tackles when you get your skill position players out in open space.
That's a fundamental
It is a
situation
fundamental-
that, quite frankly, should never happen. If you want to turn it around, and this is funny, but if you want to turn it around, At least we know that the missed tackles on defense has been the steady and consistent problem, as opposed to how many times have we gone through a terrible losing Giants season, and every week it's something different. At least we know now
that there's
it's
consistency.
missing
Okay.
tackles.
Well, if you want to look at it through that lens.
So we know it's one problem. It's not 5 problems. It's one problem. They're missing tackles like every week.
Well, that's the problem in terms
That should
of
be easier to fix.
alleviating and stopping the big plays. But then I would also argue you do want to see a little bit more disruption up front, too. That's
No
the
doubt.
other thing that hasn't fully blown up yet. You know, we saw a little bit of against Arizona. We saw a little bit of it early with Kayvon getting the sack, but it's coming in bits and pieces, Paul. And it's not coming consistently throughout a game.
No doubt.
So, you know, that's the other thing. And then on offense, well, if the trenches play struggles, every other facet of your offense is going to be impacted. And to the last caller's point, you know, this is where maybe you get over the hump a little bit if you get not just the quarterback, but you get another player to consistently do things out of the ordinary to make you not focus on those issues up front. And they're not having those game-changing plays because we're not talking about, Paul, and I understand game flow and situation, but we're not talking about one near explosive play yesterday at all. We were talking about that in the second half of the Arizona game.
Yes.
And I know a lot of people after that said, well, maybe they're turning the corner. Maybe this is an indication of what's yet to come. And I was a big proponent of you could be encouraged, but doing that against Arizona versus doing it against San Francisco is apples and oranges. And that's what I think we're seeing again, where the opponent is dictating more where the success comes from.
Point is, they needed those kinds of plays yesterday
Without a doubt.
to have any kind of chance at all. And we discussed that going in. This was not a secret. They were going to have to get that stuff to have an opportunity. And those things didn't appear. And guess what? They lost.
Let's head back to the phone lines. Let's go to Elliot in California here with us on BBKL. What's happening, Elliot?
Hey, guys. How's it going, man?
Doing all right. What's on your mind?
Good. I have a few things. I'm just going to see if you guys want to I'll just take it off the air. I'll just run through it.
Sure, that makes sense. Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay. First of all, last night, the Prime Crew, it's terribly disappointing because this isn't the first time it's happened in the primetime game, and I get the Giants have been 1-11 or whatever in primetime games, but the whole Prime Crew, the whole time, they talk about San Francisco, barely mention the Giants, and when they do, it's all negative. And I get it. It's a team. It's Richard Sherman, Whitworth, Gonzalez. I can't remember. Someone else was there too, and you know they're all ex-players, and it's just disappointing to see. It's just not good broadcasting, I think. And I don't know if you guys want to comment on that, but if you guys notice,
I'll only go back to what you said. The Giants have not been a good primetime team, and that goes back all the way to even the merger back to 1970. They've never been a really good primetime team. Their performances have always made you scratch your head, or they've underachieved. They're well under 500 in prime time.
Well, and with Daniel Jones as the starter too.
Been
barely have a win.
What are they? Are they 1-11?
I think it may be that case. If anything,
it's nasty.
Yeah,
it's nasty.
Not a great track record.
So you know there's going to be that inclination that's going to downplay them in the primetime situation, given what they've put on the tape. I'm not saying it's right. I'm not saying it's right, but that's human nature.
Yeah, I agree, man. Okay, so, moving on. Daniel Jones, I'm a believer. I think he's our franchise quarterback. I think he makes great decisions. I think he's a great quarterback. I can't say more about him. But, I'm reading some stats here, and the Niners were in the backfield faster than Dallas, according to, I think, PFF. And it says here in 3 games, Daniel Jones was pressured 40% of the time, which is generally a number that's not a viable QB, not available for a viable QB play. So Jones, he doesn't have time to do anything. He's not going to be able to do anything. And, our offensive line is young. They're getting better. I don't know if you guys want to speak to our offensive line about, how young they are and Daniel Jones not having time. But also I was looking back at the Arizona game at the highlights, and all of our plays that were big plays seemed like they were play action. Like the highlights, boom, play action, play action.
They're very good at that. Even with Eli, that was Eli's forte.
Yeah.
So I'm wondering if our run game is being stymied how it was last night. And again, at Arizona, Barkley was making big plays, so I get it. Like, it's helping our play action. But is there a way to scheme up these play action plays without having a run game, with getting maybe Wandell on the screen?
You got to get them to respect it.
Yeah.
That's the whole key.
And we'll let you go on that note, Elliot. Appreciate the phone call.
That's the whole key.
Yeah, I mean, you have to.
You got to get them to respect it. That's why Barkley's a headache player.
There was an example on the flip side, to just spell out the last caller's point, where they showed a replay. I forget which play it was, but you saw the Giants linebackers creep up to the line of scrimmage. McCaffrey was in the backfield, and then Purdy went play action, and then he had like a wide open throw in the flat or up the right sideline. And I thought, Kirk Herbstreit did a really nice job breaking it down, where you said to yourself, yeah, well, the Giants need to give the opposition a reason to do that. There was no reason. When you run the ball 11 times for 29 yards, what reason are you giving Fred Warner? Why does Fred Warner, Paul, have a reason to creep closer to the
You can
line of scrimmage?
cheat.
Yeah.
It's that simple. You can cheat. Anyone else who wants to harp on Jones, I'll give you a little piece of ammunition, right? Over the last 2 years, Giants have 11 total wins over the last 2 seasons. You include the win in Minnesota, okay?
The playoff game you're talking about.
Yeah.
Okay, gotcha.
He's had 7 game-winning drives. 7 of the 11 were orchestrated by Jones' game-winning drives in crunch time. It's a pretty good percentage. So Daniel Jones has proven an awful lot to, whoever still wants to keep their eyes closed. Daniel Jones has proven an awful lot. He needed a Herculean effort yesterday, but there were too many factors working against him that it was just not going to happen.
And as far as the point about the offensive line, yeah, the offensive line's young. There's no doubt about it. You got Josh Azudu, you got Marcus McKeithen now in the lineup, the 2 guys that were not consistent starters last season. They're getting their feet wet. Then here's an example of what happens when you make changes. Shane Lemieux got the call yesterday.
Yeah.
Okay, as opposed to putting Glowinski back in with Ben Bredesen still nursing the concussion. So what happens? Now Azudu is playing next to a new offensive lineman to the right of him. Okay?
Correct.
We talked about this with Andrew Thomas. When you continue to move around at left guard, it's not just him having to win his individual battles. He has to get used to a different player who's right beside him. And then also, by the way, John Michael Schmitz, who's a rookie, he has to get used to now having another guy to his left. So those play into the dynamics as well. I am in no ways justifying or making excuses for the play. The play speaks for itself, but you at least need to look at the youth combining with the changes and that playing a factor and a role in impacting the play of the line.
It can. There's no question. It can. How much? I don't know what the answer is. I don't know what the percentage is, but you certainly have to take that into account.
Let's head back to the phone lines. We check in with Mike in Virginia joining us here on BBK. What's happening, Mike?
Hey, good afternoon, fellas. How y'all doing?
Same to you. Doing all right. What's on your mind?
Good. Again, just want to talk about what's going on. It's like you expect so much more from the team. I mean, through the past, we've always known that Giants, when it comes to teams like this that are top tier, we always play them tough. So I did expect that. But what I do not understand is just, again, like you said, the line play. But realistically, the teams that are good and consistently win in this league have good depth. And it's getting to a point to where, okay, our starter goes down and our depth is so poor, that's what we get. Lemieux has been on this team since Joe Judge. And I saw this man get bull rushed and was on skates going into Daniel Jones' lap. And it's just, when you see plays like this, it's like, it's a thing where you look at it like, what do the coaches see when they see this person out there? Then you have questions when it also comes to a wide receiver core. Like, they played man press, and nobody can get open. And we've been dealing with this, unfortunately, since we let Beckham go. And this is just, you expect so much more from these players that are signing these deals. Isaiah Hodgins, you expect so much more from him. You expect so much more from Darren Waller. You expect so much more from Paris Campbell. We understand Wandell Robinson was hurt. But it's like, at the end of the day, you got to make a play. Make a play, somebody. but it's like balls going through your hands, bouncing off your hands. Now it's intercepted. It's just like it's just that snowball effect, and it's just very frustrating. What I do, I've always been a Daniel Jones fan, even from day one. You know, the issues, but again, it just seems like it just consistently goes back to the line. Defensively, man, I didn't expect this. Not from what we were from last year, and it seemed like we upgraded, and we're worse than we were last year. Am I wrong?
Well, clearly the run game defense was bad last season. That's why they went out and brought in some of those big bruisers. So, I mean, I don't know if it got worse. I mean, I would say it stays as is, at least in that department. And then you're working with young corners, and Deonte Banks went out with an arm injury yesterday too. So that didn't necessarily help. But the run defense was a problem last season. So that wasn't stellar and all of a sudden took 3 steps back. That carried over from last season is the best way that I would classify that. You haven't seen the level of improvement, Mike, I think is what you're getting at, that you had anticipated with the arrival of some of the free agents that they brought in.
And that's very fair. I think we all feel that way.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, we all feel that way. Just to add this one other thing, though, that's 3 games in the books, and it's getting dangerously close to figuring out what your team is, because the rule of thumb is always 4 games. You know, you got to get through September, and by the 4th game, after you get through September, you're supposed to have an idea of what your team is. Well, 3 games in, I don't think we know what the Giants are yet, because what we've seen has not met expectations. They're not playing to the back of their football cards. And you know what? They better get to it against Seattle. All right? Let's make that clear. They better get to it against Seattle. Boy, I hate that term must win. But they cannot go 1-3 and leg an egg against Seattle at home. And you know what? It's another one of those primetime games. My goodness, folks. You want me to sound the alarm? I'll do it now. Got to beat Seattle.
Well, by the way, they also got another primetime game right after that against Buffalo, too. Let's not forget.
2 weeks later. 2 weeks later.
They're coming fast and furious. You know, see, that's why everybody wants to see the primetime games. But sometimes they become dangerous.
I'm curious on Hyatt. Like, if we got to figure out ways to get this young man the ball. Now, again, the line's not holding up.
Yeah,
so
you can't throw deep.
He was dropped correctly.
Yeah, you know,
you can't throw it deep if you don't have time.
100%, Mike. Yeah, I mean,
but that goes back to let's go back to Eli's last. You can't throw it deep if you don't have a line, and we've been dealing with this since Manning's last 4 years. Now we're moving past that, and we're in the Daniel Jones. This is his 4th year.
Well, 2019 was year number 1. So this is year 5.
Year 5.
So it's just like we've been going through this for I don't know how many years, and it's. True fans are going to be fans, and we're going to be here, but it's just frustrating when it's like we have so much talent, and you see the talent, and it just last year was a great season, but it's like you're supposed to carry this over.
Well, but Mike, listen, that's why we warned a lot of our viewers and listeners, and I'm going to let you go on that and appreciate the phone call, that the way football works is, even though you may be encouraged by some things for the previous season, you don't just all of a sudden roll it over and sprinkle in some new talent. Paul, we've had this conversation left and right. You know, it's not to say that we were presenting a doomsday scenario, but we warn that football just doesn't work like that. You just can't make those assumptions. So even if somebody's appealing to you on paper, you don't snap your fingers. I mean, I think a lot of people, Paul, probably figured Darren Waller was going to have 9 catches every single game for 100 yards, and nobody was going to be able to stop him. I think a lot of people probably felt that way. And clearly, that's not the case, because if you have problems on the offensive line and you have a lot of attention towards Darren Waller, somebody else is going to have to make a play. You know, Jalen Hyatt made that 58-yard catch against Arizona because if you go back, Daniel Jones had an opportunity to get set, survey the field, and throw it down the field. So you can't expect that every single week if all of a sudden the Niners' defensive front doesn't give you the same flexibility.
And again,
in that department.
With 3 games in, this team may still yet prove that it is better than the 2022 edition
Could
of
very
the
well,
Giants.
in terms of the whole season overall.
By the time the season's over, we may still wind up saying that.
Very feasible.
But right now, after 3 games, we're not saying that.
And we can only analyze it based on 3
That's
games
it.
at this point.
Yeah. And quickly, Hodgins, Coach Dable, he only had 16 snaps last night and didn't have any targets. Coach Dable said they had a lot more plays in the playbook for him, but because they only had 49 snaps, I think, on offense, He said they just didn't get to a bunch of them.
Well, they held
Just so you know.
They held the ball for about 20 minutes. The
Yes.
Niners had it for
Yes.
39. So the Niners essentially doubled up the Giants in time of possession. And you know where I stand on time of possession. Time of possession is great. It's all about what you've done with it. Well, the Niners, they at least had 30 points to show for 39 minutes of time of possession. The Giants had 12 points to show for 20 minutes
You
of time of possession.
want a good stat in this really, really rough evening to watch? San Francisco was only 2 of 5 in the red zone. The Giants actually made some very
they had to
good
settle for 3
plays,
field goals. Yeah.
forcing them to settle for 3 field goals, where I'm pretty sure as the Niners were driving on those possessions, everybody was thinking, oh, they're just going right in. They're just going right in. That was the feel that you had. 3 times the Giants actually kept them out of the end zone.
And remember, the Giants last season had a really good red zone defense.
They did.
They were one of the tops in the NFL. So that was a positive, that bend but don't break type of philosophy. But with that being said, 9 possessions, 9 legitimate possessions for the Niners, because, you know, there's some at the end of
Right.
the half, and 6 of them they wound up scoring.
Like
in
I
some
said
capacity.
earlier, I'm more angry at the defense than I am any other unit right now, because they had opportunities to turn the narrative of this game around and just did not do it.
Let's head back to the lines. We got Mike in Colorado joining us here on BBKL. What's happening, Mike?
Hey, how are you guys doing?
You're right.
Hi.
Hey, just want to make a follow-up point to what you were saying, Lance, about can't expect to carry it over, which I agree with. But we know who we carried Dallas over, we carried San Francisco over, we carried Philadelphia. We know who they were, and we carried them over to believe that they're going to be good and maybe even better than they were last year. So that I just want to say.
Well,
that I
because
agree
they've
with you
proven
for
it,
the most
though.
part.
But Mike, in fairness, those 3 teams, they've proven it. Based on the sample size of some have played 2, some have played 3 games, they've proven that they deserve that benefit of the doubt. And they've also done it for multiple years in a row. The Giants were coming off a lone playoff berth, which was a rare occurrence for them. So, you know, that's the other difference between the Giants and those 3 other organizations that you're talking about.
I think the experience level is very important to note here. I mean, like the gentleman before was killing the Giants' backup offensive linemen. Well, you know what? Those guys are very inexperienced when you compare, you know, their number of games played and snaps played at this level. That may still wind up being a very talented group. But right now, they're going through growing pains.
Yeah, you guys, those are good points. I totally agree with that. The reason I was calling was more, I wasn't listening earlier, so you might have talked about this already, but Trey Hawkins last night, I saw him back away from several tackles and even make some ghost attempts. Did you guys see the same thing out of him? Or is he not willing to get in there and mix it up, or what was the deal there?
You know, I've seen him be very willing to mix it up in the first 2 games. Last night, that's not something that stuck out. I was on the sideline by the bench, so my perspective was not the TV camera or the high overhead. I will go back, as I always do, to review the tape, and I'll take a look for that. I will make note and see if that was the case. But I did not see that in the first 2 games.
Yeah, I didn't notice it, too, from viewing the game. I will say this. There was the defensive holding penalty that he had.
Yep.
But I don't think that was necessarily an issue in terms of the willingness to tackle, because if you're being held for holding, then clearly you're in the vicinity of the guy in terms of coverage. But I will say this, Mike. If you want to improve the run defense, we talked about the linebackers, we talked about the guys up front. Your corners have to help and tackle.
Yeah.
You know, that's the sign of a good run defense. When those guys know there's not anything going in the air, they have to be committed to help out the guys up front. That helps you turn the corner.
Deonte Banks for the second game now had
Couldn't
to go
finish the
out
game.
because of
Yeah.
injury, and he's a very physical corner. I would say he also helps in run
Yeah.
support.
And by the way, this is not cramps. This is an arm injury, so it's also a little bit different.
Yeah,
from
and
that
by the
thing.
way, we have no updates on the injuries. I should have said that earlier in the show. Brian Dable did not have anything to
guys
give
are
us.
undergoing further tests, at least at this stage.
Well,
Yeah.
it just seemed like there was a noticeable difference between McKinney's aggressiveness and all the tackles he was in on compared to Hawkins. But I was just watching on TV. You guys can watch it again if it's worth it. But
Sure. Well, Mike,
all I had.
we appreciate the phone call.
Thank you.
Thanks for giving us a ring. And remember, that also speaks volumes of the difference in experience. You know, McKinney, polished vet. I know he missed some time with injury, but, you know, Trey Hawkins also still getting his feet wet while playing opposite a rookie corner.
Safeties characteristically get a lot more tackles than corners.
They do.
a lot more
yeah.
opportunities.
Well, and they're different style players too. Right?
Correct.
I mean, from that.
So I don't know that
Yeah.
that part of his comment really
No,
holds much
and that's
water.
why I agree with you. I don't think that necessarily holds much weight. Coach Marvin is in Delaware, finishing us off here on BBKO. What's happening, Coach Marvin?
Wow, you guys treated me like I was a Giant fan. I've been on the phone for 56 minutes.
Well, we've had a lot of calls today, so
Oh, because they told me I was the third call. But,
Well, I don't know who's telling you, but there is no order or priority list. There's no red carpet treatment when it comes to this program.
Coach,
I can assure you.
I just hope you use that time to get some lunch.
I guess if I was from Maine, I would have got in right away. But,
Well, I don't know about that.
I can guarantee you.
You haven't been
with
listening
him
or watching
here,
it closely, if
not
that's what you
happening.
think. Yes.
I guarantee
So
you.
yes, there is a prioritization with respect to that individual that you named.
Go ahead.
That's
Go
not
ahead,
a good
Coach.
prioritization.
Okay.
Yes.
It's a lot. It's so much. Somebody just called, and Trey did. Either he got nervous or he closed his eyes. It was a ghost tackle. You need to see it more than once. He did it.
Okay.
I'm a fan of his, but he wasn't aggressive, and nobody was. McFadden played a good game, but I think it wasn't clean tackle. He made one clean one where he came through the line and hit McCaffrey in the backfield. That was an excellent tackle. But a lot of his tackles was drag downs, and they all are dragging guys down. And these guys are dragging them 4 or 5 yards downfield. And I think that's because I'm not going to say we're not physical. They were more physical, but what they add to their physicalness is they were violent. They ran the ball violent, and that's why it was tough to tackle them. We tackling up high, chest to chest. You ain't going to take nobody down tackling them chest to chest.
Yeah, that's why
You better bring
tackling
your
is a
pads.
fundamental skill. Yeah.
Yeah, you better bring your pads and you better bring your feet with you and drive. I was just in the supermarket and a guy saw me with Giant stuff on and he was behind me. He's like, Giants? And I looked back and he said, oh, what happened to y'all last night? And I kind of explained to him, my thinking is, this is me talking. I think what happened is there's no more hitting in practice. And I think all summer they tackle in that wheel. So when they tackle in that wheel, they dive in and bringing it down. They tackle in a bag, they dive in and bringing it down. So there's no more tackling. Then they didn't play in the extra bit in the preseason. So now you got to put on and go live. Think about this. When I was in the Department of Justice, I went to law enforcement school. They trained you into a gunfight. What? And if you're not trained in it, what you think you're going to do in a gunfight? You're not going to show up.
Yeah.
You're going to run away from it, if anything.
Well, Coach, listen, I understand your point, but the only thing that I would counter is you watch teams like the Niners, you watch the Cowboys, you watch the Eagles, and they don't necessarily have those similar issues that pop up on a week-to-week basis, and they're going through the same CBA negotiated rules.
It's not universal, but there is an epidemic of poor tackling in this league, and there has been for 30 years.
You're right. You both are right. But one thing you got to understand is sometimes you got players that are born aggressive, and you got some players that are not born aggressive. And if you look at the Cowboys and you look at those top teams that play defense like that, they're formed aggressive play, violent playing. And you could the old Giants, Paul, with Lawrence and all those guys, they didn't have to play in the preseason, but they were violent, naturally violent. And we're not naturally violent. I think they need to practice that, and I know they can't because of the CBA, but it's going to take a couple of weeks before they start really hitting and not really worrying about their bodies hitting. And I think that's what's happening to them, and that's why they're having bad time tackling. They need to play more games. About people talking about Daniel Jones. I like Daniel. I would prefer to have me my man in Kansas City there.
Patrick Mahomes. I think
yeah.
a lot of other teams are making the same wish.
Every team would want one of those, but we don't have one. So I have to look at it like this. What if Daniel Jones is playing for San Francisco? Do you think he performs the same? I think you'll see a different player. If he's playing for a team that is, in most of those teams that are up above us, which are the franchise teams, they have good offensive lines. And it's not many of those teams. It's really not. Maybe 5 of them, 6 at the most that are playing that way? And we're not one of them. We know how to win, but we're not winners. And that's what I said about the phase of being a winner. You have to learn how to compete. You have to win games that you should win. And then what puts you above with everybody else up at top, you win games that you shouldn't win.
Yes.
And we can't win those games that we shouldn't win.
Well, because if you don't execute, you're not going to win. I mean, that's what it comes down to.
And exactly. That's the competition part that comes into play. Now, last night we did compete a little bit. We didn't. I thought going into this game, we didn't have a much problem of traveling because they were already over there. They played in Arizona.
Yeah.
So the travel didn't really play a role, and it did show a little bit because when they got in the red zone, they started D'ing up a little bit and making them kick field goals and keeping us in the game.
Yeah, this was not a question about effort. It was not an issue of effort.
It wasn't.
Yeah.
My question, it was our tackling.
Yeah, well, and that's execution. And once again, and we'll let you go on that note, Coach Marvin. Appreciate the phone call. And that's why when you execute like that, you talk about learning how to win. Well, you're not going to put yourself in a position to win if you execute like that. So it defeats the purpose of even having the conversation about learning how to win. First, you have to get over the hump with respect to those other key elements in play. Then you could talk about finding a way to close out the game. You got to put yourself in a position to do those other aspects. So that'll wrap up Friday's edition of Big Blue Kickoff Live. We'll be back up and running again on Monday at 12:30 p.m. Eastern. And a reminder that when it comes to Big Blue Kickoff Live, this program, you can check it out as part of the Giants platforms everywhere and Giants.com/podcasts. For Paul Dottino, I'm Lance Medow. Enjoy the weekend with no Giants football. We'll be back up and running again on Monday as we look ahead to the following Monday, the next game for the Giants as they will collide with the Seattle Seahawks. Enjoy the rest of the weekend. Have a good one.